So you're new to iRacing and you're not quite sure where to start. Now, there's lots of videos out there about the things that you need to know when you're getting started in iRacing, but there's not that many videos out there that show you the things that you need to make sure you're set up when you very first start in iRacing, and some little tricks and tips to, find the small secrets, the secret sauce to get yourself set up and ready to go. So in this video, I thought I'd take you through a few of the things that you really need to make sure that you do that just aren't covered in a lot of the other help videos or getting started in iRacing videos. So let's jump straight into Sim. I'm going to assume that you've already loaded iRacing, that you've installed it on your PC, and that you've got yourself to the start point, I guess, and looking at the home screen in the UI. So let's get straight into the video. All right, so here we are. I'm going to assume, as I said, that you've already installed the iRacing UI and that you've managed to get yourself to this screen here. So the next thing you're going to think is, well, what now? What do I do here? What do I need to know? How do I get around? So I'm just going to give you a very brief rundown on this before we get into the things that I think you need to do and the things that I think you need to know when you very first start out. So in one of my previous videos, I mentioned that one of the things that you need to know how to locate is your iRacing user number. So if you go into and click on your account, then it comes up here. So this is your user ID that you'll need if you're looking at trading paints, because it does map back to your user ID. So this is your user ID that you need to know. So if you're ever looking for that and you're not sure where to go, you just jump into the helmet there, click on that, and then go to accounts, and you can click on and it gives you that one there. The other thing you can do in there is change it to dark theme, which I prefer to run because otherwise it's too bright for me. So that is in there as well if you're wondering how I got the screen to look that way. Down the right here, you've got all of your license classes with your I rating and your safety rating. So starting with oval and then sports cars, and you go into your formula car, which is a new change that iRacing introduced not all that long ago. And then you've got your oval and dirt. You can see I don't do a lot of dirt oval and a lot of dirt road, but working through the oval license on getting that one back up, but mainly spend most of my time in the sports cars. So obviously your profile here, it's got all of your stats, lots of different things to look at there. None of mine are all that special. I'm definitely not an alien or anything like that. Gives you your stats, awards, and your certificates. For some reason, there's no data in there at all because I should have got a certificate. You got one there for first place on the Petite Le Mans. But anyway, so that gives you all of that information there and can help you with any of the statistics that you need around getting your promotion or any of that sort of stuff within your licenses. My content, so this is a scary place for me to go because of the amount of money that I would have spent on all of this stuff over time. But if you're wondering if you've got a car or a track, you can come here and it will let you know. There are easier ways to know that, but just so that you know what happens in that tab. So you want to get into a race. Official is where you're going to go. You can see all of the races that you're eligible for. If you need to buy content to get into that race, you'll see this little shopping trolley logo next to it, and you can hover over it and it will tell you what you need. So I actually need to buy the car, the USF 2000, for this series to be eligible to drive in it. You can change this view from grid view to list view. I find list view is quite handy if you're looking for something to jump into straight away, but prefer really to stick with grid view because I recognize the logo rather than having to read through everything. The other thing that you can do is change it from all series to one that meets MPR. So they're ones that you need to do to promote your license level. And you can also switch from ranked to unranked. You can switch from different car types as well. But the other thing that you can do here is go into tags and just switch it to eligible. So if you're just starting out, that way you don't get a full screen of stuff. Or if you've just recently been promoted, you could say turn on D-Class and Rookie, and then it just brings in, again, what you're eligible to run in D-Class and Rookie. But we want all tags on because I like to have a look at everything that's available. So there's not a lot else you need to do here. If you want to do time attacks, you can. If you want to do an AI race against AI, of course. There's not a lot else here to go through. Obviously, time attacks here. AI, you can go and set up an AI race there. If you want to jump into a hosted session, if you're setting one up or you're running one with your mates, then obviously you're going to grab them there. And if you're a member of any leagues that are set up and run, you're jumping into that there. Down the bottom here, you've got access to the iRacing forum and access to the settings so that you can just generally set up. There's not a lot in here for you to do. The standard settings are pretty good. Okay, so next, we're going to jump into a session. Now, I'm just going to go into test drive. So that's up the top here. This is where you can create your own session. Just to highlight, if you are actually looking to jump into an official practice session, you can do that in here and you can register. So you can watch the practice or you can actually register for the practice, and then it brings up your cars and what you can and can't jump into there as well. But we're just going to set up a test drive. We'll jump in that. We're in the Ferrari. We're at Spa. It doesn't really matter where we are because I'm just going to run you through some of the basics that you want to assign when you get into the car first and foremost. Okay, so you've loaded in, it's loaded up the screen and you're confronted with this image here. So when you load in, it's going to show you some of the rules of the track. They come up on the left-hand side here. Handy if it's the first time you've run there to get an idea of off-tracks and things like that, but generally something that you'll turn off and not have. Always opens up with the radio box up as well. If you're wondering what everything else is here, this is your basic information about how your PC is running with iRacing. All of these have different meanings, but really the main ones that you want to look at are obviously your frame rate, your latency, and this here is actually, if you hover over it, it's about the basically the delay between the server and the PC and how it actually is operating in sync. You can have these as colored bars, but I've found over the time that it's better to have them indicated as numbers because the colored bars just jump around a lot if they do move and it's distracting while you're driving. So I set it as numbers. I only worry about it if it's not green, with the exception of C. So if you don't have that set up, let's jump into options first and foremost. So this is your control panel. This is where you've got a lot of opportunity to make changes around how you interact with the game, around how your equipment interacts with the game. If you're ever needing to recalibrate any of your pedals or anything like that, that's where you would do this here. And the first time you get into iRacing, it will get you to do this. And you just want to make sure that you've got, once you've done this as well, that these other fields don't change too much. So if you're running load cell pedal, have that ticked so that it's set to a linear mode, so it's not misrepresenting the information that it's getting. Obviously you want to enable your force feedback, again using a linear mode. And then the strength and things like this here are all based around the wheelbase that you've got, and everyone has their own version of the best way to set these up. With mine, with my Simucube 2, I use TrueDrive, which is their software, to dictate how my wheel feels and the feedback that I get. So all I've done here is set the wheel force to the maximum that the direct drive base can do, which is 25 Newton meters. And the strength you can actually adjust when you're in the car. So get this to a setting that you're comfortable with, and then you will find that in various cars you'll need to turn it up and down. So, you know, for instance, when I go oval track racing, I drop this down to 5 because 6.5, you're just getting absolutely roasted for the entirety of the race, and you end up coming out of it with dead forearms. Now, in terms of things that you really want to set to start off with, a lot of these types of controls will be assigned to your keyboard. And when you're racing, the keyboard is great, but it's also not convenient because you've got to try and look away from the screen to press any of the buttons. Now, I am going to do a separate video on a cheap way to get a button box set up for you. But if you've already got one, this is where you get to start sort of setting up your preferences around how you want your controls to be. So I run, and I'm going to turn this on just now. So I run this wheel here, which is the Porsche RSR wheel from Grid, which is an amazing wheel if you ever want to spend the money on it. But obviously I use the buttons on the wheel here to control a majority of the functions that I need in the car, along with the encoders as well for things like traction control and ABS. Now you might not need or be here, you may never get here, you may never want to get here, so you need to have some sort of solution for yourself that works in best, so that when you're in the game you can focus on what's in front of you, and obviously you end up with muscle memory and know where the different buttons are. The most critical button in all of iRacing that is underused by people is the exit, enter, tow car button. So for me, that's this one here that's got the big tow sticker on it. And the reason it's the most important button is because when you stack on track, that's the button you need to push to be towed and removed from the track. The reason why I say it's underused is because there's a lot of people, particularly when they're rookies, who try and do a 15-point turn, Austin Powers style, to get themselves back onto track, when really what they do, their car's totaled, it might be a short race, they just need to get towed back to pit lane, and the race is over. So you want this button to be conveniently located for you so that you can use it. It's also the button that you use to get into the car. So if you're in the main menu and you want to get into it, you press that button and it will get you into pit lane. Look left and right I don't really use because I'm running triple screen, so I've got peripheral vision, but you do want these to be handy again if you aren't. If you're running a single screen, you want to look left, look right. I'd be encouraging you, if you've got the ability on your steering wheel, and even entry-level steering wheels have it, to either use the keypad or buttons left and right to be able to get that peripheral vision that you need. Driving aids, obviously everyone's going to vary on what they use here. You can have the clutch be automated, you can auto blip, auto shift. Some of these things, they do cost you lap time, so if you can do it, run without it. If you need it on just to get started and get used to the cars, then turn it on. Driving line, very handy when you start, but it's not necessarily the quickest way around the track. So bear that in mind. If you're not familiar with the track, and even me, if there's a new track that's coming out that I'm not familiar with, I'll turn the driving line on while I'm doing my first 5 or 10 laps, just to help me remember the layout of the track, and then once it's embedded in my mind, I turn it off. Brake assistance, throttle assistance, pit exit line are all things that you can play with if you want. Auto tear off I would always turn on. That means when you go into a pit stop, you're going to get a windscreen tear off. Auto wipers is a new feature, obviously, based around the introduction of the tempered system, which I leave turned on, even though I do have a button set to manually turn on and turn off my wipers. And auto engine start's always handy to have in case you in the pits for a long time. It just activates on the touch of the throttle. In the options menu, again, not as much here for you to be able to really do a lot with when you first get into it, but it is where you start to turn on some of the information on the screen, so you can have feedback coming from iRacing about a comparative for yourself against either the best lap time, all-time best lap time, comparison lap. Generally when I'm using this, I'll always run on a session best lap, and the reason for that is because you're not always going to be in a track that's got the same conditions as when you did your best lap time, and what you're really looking for is improvement. The delta bar appears at the top of the screen to show you how close or how far away you are from your optimal time, and you can display a reference car, which is like a ghost car, and that is handy. I find it a little bit frustrating to always have the shadow of a car moving in and out of your field of view, but again, good for you if you're just starting out in the sim, you want to have a look at it. The driver's view, look, a lot of this information is set when you do your graphics config. The field of view is the most important one. Driver height and field of view and shift horizon. So shift horizon is literally as it sounds. Vertically shift the horizon up and down the screen. You can adjust these in car. So once you get your field of view right, then you can just fine tune it by using these settings, and you can do it while you're in the car. Text chat. This will appear in the bottom right hand corner, and it will also appear at the top, so you'll see messages about people connecting and disconnecting, what have you. Not really all that important to have it on. It's distracting a little bit, and in fact, while I remember, I'm going to turn it off. Show chat messages while driving, again, can be a little bit distracting, but handy to have on if you are doing endurance races where you're communicating with other teams. That box that I showed you here with the graphics settings, this is how you turn it on. So show frame rate meter, and then you can pick what you want to see. You can switch here from graphic to numerical or hidden. The only one that I have hidden is audio, because at the end of the day, if I lose audio, it's not going to affect my race. It's not going to crash my race or mean I have to bail. But if I start getting graphics or networks issues, of course, or if I start getting clipping issues with steering wheels, then they're things that I want to know about. You can customize the text chat here as well. You can change what these say and allocate them to numbers. I haven't bothered because I'm not really fussed about sending messages out while I'm racing. Miscellaneous tab, again, not a great amount of stuff here for you to have a look at. Base shakers and stuff like that, if you do have them equipped, that'll be here. Logitech True Force is available there for you as well. But a lot of this other stuff I don't even play with or touch. It doesn't really bother me. You do want to enable video capture and screen capture if you want to take replays, or if you do want to take screenshots during or after the race. Well, not during the race, but certainly after the race. Graphics tab. Now, I'm not going to go into detail too much on this. There's lots of videos out there about optimizing the graphic settings for your particular setup and what all of these individually do. But in the interim, particularly at the start, look, I always stick to max quality, or I'll drag it to max frame rate and then start adjusting things so that I can head towards that max quality. The one thing that you do want to turn off straight away is foliage. I turn that off. It's a sapper for your frame rate. And the only other thing that you do want to do, I turn off the two-pass trees. That actually means that it renders trees twice. The trees, I don't really care how they look. They're on the side of the track. Same with the high-quality trees. But I also turn off the cockpit mirrors max and higher detailing mirrors because I'm not as worried about that, and I just run the virtual mirror, so that's one big mirror in the middle of the screen here, rather than having all of the mirrors working in the in-screen, the in-car screen if it has got one. I find it that distracting, and I don't really need to use the wing mirrors as such. So for the heads-up mirror is much more effective than having the small mirrors on the outside of the car. Turn your motion blur off. You can adjust the field of view of your virtual mirror. Around about 60 or 70 degrees is effectively 1-to-1. At the ratio I use it at, the objects in my mirror probably appear closer than they actually are. Not a great deal else in here. You can max your frame rate here. Probably the only other thing to touch on. A lot of people leave this set to blow it out of the water, but there's no point setting it faster than your screens can handle. I've got 144 Hz monitors, so I set it at 145 just so it sits just above it. And I don't see any real reason to run it any higher than that. I'm sure there's somebody out there who'll tell me there's a reason for it, but that's just how I like to set it up. Replay settings, just enable replays. I always have this ticked, ask to save replay on quit, because there's nothing worse than going to jump out of a race and then actually forgetting to actually save the replay. So I always have that ticked and then decline it if I don't want to do it. There are some settings you can change in here in terms of how it looks, but again, I'm not restreaming races or anything like that, so I don't find it too important. Head into sound. The second most important button you probably want to program is push to talk, and then followed by mute. So you've got to enable voice chat, it's not automatically enabled, and then assign this to another button on your steering wheel. Again, it's important to have it if you are particularly in endurance racing, but it is important to have it to be able to communicate during the race in the right way, and that is only really when you need to. The other one is having the mute button set, because if the chat gets too much for you, then you can just mute it. If you're not running the Crew Chief plugin, then you'll have a spotter enabled. You can have a variety of voice packs. You can see there's a number of different ones that they've got there in terms of who speaks to you, and you can adjust how much they talk to you, whether or not there's voice and text, and the output device that it comes through on. The pit box countdown one is really one that you want to tick if you're new and you're wanting to, you're getting in, and your pit stops are something that you'll get exposed to when you move up through the license ranks. I always find it handy because the pit box changes, so you're not always obviously in the same pit box, so you want to know where you are when you pull into pit lane. Just going through sound levels, again, there's lots of variety of feedback here around how people set this up, and at the end of the day, the preference comes down to what you find important. For me, as you can see, I've got the tyre volume set all the way up because I want to hear the chirping and sliding of the tyres to understand whether or not I'm pushing too hard in terms of grip levels, more than I want to hear the engine revs, because again, with the shift lights on the top of the wheel here, even if I'm relying on the shift lights, but with the shift lights on the top of the wheel here, I don't have to hear the sound. It's great for immersion, but it's not necessarily going to get me to drive any faster. And then again, with these other settings, it's just a matter of personal preference. How loud do you want things? The chat volume, yeah, again, as long as you've got the adjustable button set up for chat, you can turn it up and down. So again, number 2, push to talk. Number 3, mute driver. Then we jump into controls. Now in here is where you can, there's a lot of different options in here, but there's not a lot of stuff that you actually need to worry too much about, particularly if you're just starting out in MX5. Things like ignition and start, you can see I still got them bound to the keyboard because I use the accelerator pedal and the auto start function to do that. So I don't need to have them set on my wheel. Headlight flash I have set up, which is the top button here, only because of the fact, again, in Enduros, it's important to be able to use that to let people know if you are a faster car coming through. But more importantly, if you're just setting this up for the first time, you want to find pit speed limiter and set that as a button. Now that is a button you should never change, and you should be as used to using as you are the shifter on your wheel. I've got it set here with a big pit sticker on it because I want to make sure that when I'm heading into pit lane, I can grab it nice and easily so that I don't end up incurring a pit lane speeding penalty. It's not a strategy that's worked for me terribly well in the past, but I am getting better at it. So you definitely want to be able to have that one activated. In here as well, you can set up your windscreen wipers, auto fuel, toggle on and off. Generally, most people will leave that set to on if they are going to do it. So the need to turn it on and off is not necessarily something that you're going to need to use. Brake bias setup and things like that you can get into later on with your rotary encoder. What I would encourage you to do, however, is have a look at your, sorry, I was going to say dash page. We want to switch to black box. So again, here, the black box control, which comes up on your screen, which is this one here, albeit I'm not in the car yet, but this one here is the black box controller. So at the moment, when I push the next page button on it, it just turns it off because there's no other pages to see. If we jump into a session here, you can see on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen is my actual black box. So I've got buttons set to scroll through the pages, and I've also got buttons set to make adjustments to the car. So if you're looking to go and you want to change all of your tires, I actually can scroll through that and set it up so that I can tick it during a race. But this is where you would control it if you're using a mouse. You can again get buttons set up to do those functions for you and select them and turn them or toggle them on and off. Not on a wheel, but that's where a button box comes in handy because you can preset that. So if we jump back out of the car and back into control settings, that's where you can make those changes here. So you can, these shortcuts take you directly to that particular black box, so fuel for example, or tires, and then you can make adjustments to the black box itself in terms of toggling those things on and off. So I've got increment controls, and I've also got it selected so that I can move around the black box. Now that is with the arrows on my keyboard, but I don't often have to do that. I'm generally changing 4 tires, I'm generally refueling to the maximum required, and I also use the auto fuel function, so it really only ever need to make small adjustments to that in the car while I'm driving. Everything else on this, look, they're things to play around with, but they're not things that you're going to need to do straight away when you jump into the sim. So not as important for you to be able to use. So I'm going to quickly just jump back into the car and show you one last thing which I mentioned when we were going through the setups. So once you've got your field of view set up, this is what I was talking about in terms of being able to make in-car adjustments. So you can adjust the field of view of the rear view mirror, which you'll see at the top of the screen is zooming in as I bring this down. So around about 60 is where it's effectively 1-to-1. I run it a bit further out because I don't need to see the car that close up. I know they're behind me. If they're behind me, I don't need to watch them that closely to see it. Field of view. So again, once you've set your field of view, if you've calculated it, you can make fine adjustments to it here. You can shift the driver horizon, and you might find that's necessary dependent on the car that you're in. I generally run it at 6%. And then the driver height is the other thing you can check. So rather than shifting the horizon, if you're struggling particularly with the bar across the top of the screen, or the windscreen banner across the top of the screen, you can just drop the height of the driver down in the car so that you're still at the right height. I run it at 2.5 centimeters because I find for me it works well with my turning points and my field of view. And again, force feedback strength, once you've set that up, the base setup, you can then make those adjustments in car. So once you get a feel for it, particularly as you start driving more, you might find that it's beneficial for you to drop that strength or increase that strength as you need to. So that's about it for my run through. So a few things there in terms of key things to set up the very first time you get into the sim. So I hope this has brought you some value and you can get out on track and make sure that you've got just the basics set up without being overwhelmed by the vast array of things that you can muck around with, and definitely jump in and do that at some stage in the future. But obviously if you're just jumping into the sim, you want to get going where you can or as quickly as you can. So if it has brought you value, it'd be fantastic if you could drop a subscribe on the channel as we make our way towards 1,000 subscribers. And if you're looking for some more content as well, we've got plenty in the tube for us to release. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Enjoy your racing.